tonight's going to be online?
That one. Well, if you need to, I can look at it here.
No, but I mean, will they all be online?
Yes, we can make them all online.
Okay.
So I wanted to, as you're looking at the slide, also add one more thing that you don't see on here, but that was talked about a lot at the last meeting, and that has to do with the properties that are immediately adjacent to Ocean Beach. So thank you for pulling up that map. These, as you can see, are all of the sites that are eligible, but keep in mind that the dark spots would be not eligible for the program, given that they have rent control units in there. So the question that I want to pose to you is, we can amend out all of these sites completely from the Affordable Housing Bonus Program. We can do that. However, I want you to also understand that if we do so, the state density bonus law applies. And under the state density bonus law, developers can ask for unlimited concessions and waivers from the planning code. And so I'm not going to make the decision alone. I want to throw the question out to you before the January 28th Planning Commission meeting so that the planning staff know how they want to talk about it with the planning commissioners. So, you know, maybe we can just do by show of hands, we could do a question and answer to get into more details, but again, we can exempt it out from the program completely, but it would be exempted only from our local program in San Francisco. The state density bonus law still applies. Or we can keep it in, and it would be subject to the state, our local version's constraints that we put on with the 30% affordable housing, the 2-bedroom requirements at 40%, and the heights capped at two stories above the current existing height limits. So just by show of hands, how many would like to exempt it completely from our local program?
Could you sketch out the ramifications of the state program? How that
There's a slide that I love that's not in here, but is it in the back? So the state law, which is what we built our program from, is actually quite developer friendly, but not super prescriptive. My favorite slide. So over here on the left, this is how I think of the state law. It says, developer, when you build a certain amount of affordable housing, you get a certain amount of density benefit. That's really clear. And then after that, they say, you get 3 concessions or incentives. So those are changes to the planning code. They could be changes to your rear yard, changes to your exposure, any of those things. And then you get whatever waivers you need to fit the extra units in your building. So the way it's written, the decision-making process very much favors the project proposal. There's an example I really love telling people about, which is in Berkeley, where a project sponsor said, I want to build a building with a courtyard, so therefore I have to go up a bunch of extra stories. And the neighbors said, no way, you could just not have a courtyard, and then you could fit all the units, and you don't need all this extra height. And the courts found if the project sponsor wants a courtyard, then he gets a courtyard, and he gets whatever he wants. So when we saw all of this, we were like, oh, we should study this. We should make a program with a list and a menu that says, no, you don't get whatever you want if you're using our program. You get to choose from this menu. And you don't get heights whenever you want. You get heights based on this formula. So we tried to take this sort of infinite options of the state law, test it with an architect and a financial consultant, and say, that's our state program. Then our local program says, if you perform from 20% affordability to 30%, you get a little more heights and a little more density, but no more than 2 stories, ever. Is that clear?
So does that mean, in a nutshell, that under the state density law, the 1979 state density law, theoretically they could build towers that are taller than 7 stories?
Well, I don't want to get like sort of out in that world of like hypotheticals, but what they could do is get 35% more density, and they could express that in whatever way they want. So I would have to like run a 10-minute test on the site with an architect, but they could potentially get more than the 2 stories.
There's no cap except.
There's no cap in the state law around heights or what kind of incentives. They could ask for lot cover. They could ask for sort of whatever, and then the onus is on us to make a case against it.
So I had asked kind of one part of the question, but I guess after hearing some of these answers and a detailed explanation, I'm going to just ask that first question again. So just by show of hands, how many people would like to completely exempt out the oceanfront properties? And again, they're mostly Kirkham and north of that, exempt that from the local proposed program. Raise them up high. Yep, don't be shy. Okay. And then how many people would like to see it included as part of our local program? All right, raise them up high. Okay. And how many people still have questions? Okay, all right, let's get to the questions.
Are you including the Richmond oceanfront properties?
No, this is just.
Why not?
We are talking about District 4 today, so.
It's oceanfront, it's ocean.
Do you need a mic to do the Q&A?
No, I'm fine, but I do need the cards.
Oh, just guess.
I can just use the mental telepathy. Okay, so we've got these kind of bunched into topics here, but I think it's really respectful of people's time who take the time to come out to these meetings. Great, there's some more cards here. Here, I'll just grab those, thank you. To use this method, we found it very effective because then nobody sort of dominates the questions. Everybody's able to get heard. And I'm going to read them in an unedited, unvarnished fashion. So question 1. And some of these questions will be for Kirsten and some maybe for Monica. Question 1. Is there a map of the soft sites, like a pinpoint map? Or, yeah, pinpoint map.
Sorry, do I have a map of the soft sites?
Yeah.
We've been handing out that heat map that I showed earlier, and part of the reason is that the soft site data, I think, gives people a false sense of security/anxiety, because the sites that we show on that map, I'm thinking of you back there, the sites that we show on that map, we did analysis on at a high level, but we don't know who owns that property. There might be a property that is very valuable for other reasons other than the size of the building, and so we don't want to connote that something's going to happen specifically to that site. So I think this is a better perspective. We've also just published what we call our CEQA document, which goes through the analytical steps we took. So that's available as well.
Okay, let me move on to the next question. Kind of a statement in the form of a question. New construction only, in quotations, means you can demolish 2-story businesses along Taravel and replace them with apartments? Question mark.
Yes, so new construction means that in order to use this program, you would have to have made a determination that the existing building is financially less valuable than demolishing it and reconstructing it. The real reason we think this is important is less about, we want demolition everywhere, and a lot more about what we didn't want to see happen, which is, maybe some of you read about this happening in New York a lot, where people say, hey, I'm going to add 2 stories to my building. By the way, everyone who lives here has to leave while I do that. By the way, now we've just evicted a huge building full of people, and what have we gotten for it? Because you were making 30% of that extra 2 stories affordable. So we actually think that's one security for that. The other security for that is there are a lot of people that live in neighborhoods, beautiful historic districts, and they're imagining their neighbors just using this as a way to add stories. And we really wanted to really limit this to places that it made sense to do full-on new construction.
Okay. These 2 questions are about the origin of the legislation and the planning process. Who wrote this legislation and what consultants were used by the planning department?
Actually, Monica wrote most of the legislation, so kudos to her. And we have a city attorney, and I did some editing, and about 27 planners reviewed and read the legislation. We hired 3 consultants, actually. 2 architects, David Baker Architects. Many people know their name. They're like a local architect firm. And then OpenScope Studio, just much smaller firm, and they helped us look at small sites. So they're both architects that work and live in the city of San Francisco. David Baker's been working here 40-some years. And then we hired Seifel Consulting, and they are a financial and economic consultant company, a women-owned San Francisco-based company that helped us figure out whether we built a program that would actually encourage development or a program that set the fees too high to actually allow development to happen.
Okay. Next question was fully typed out, so that's an interesting trick. We read from your blueprint document that objective 1 is to, quote, identify areas where additional housing can be built on underutilized lots and transit and business corridors. Is this where you feel affordable housing is appropriate? And since most of the sites your document identifies are privately held, what are your plans for influencing these private owners to treat these locations as sites for affordable housing? Supervisor is going to handle that.
Thank you. So yes, our blueprint does identify and provide kind of a soft story map about District 4. And coincidentally, at the same time that we were looking at the soft sites in our district, Planning Department happened to be working on this affordable housing bonus program, and that's actually how I came to be part of this effort. So I know that some of you may be wondering, why is a District 4 supervisor involved? And we were trying to figure out a way to really look at, for our smaller buildings, how do we incentivize more units that serve our middle, moderate income families. So in terms of the neighborhood commercial corridors, I'll just tell you that we have tried to contact many property owners along our commercial corridors, whether it's Terrible, Irving, Noriega, Judah, in order to better engage them to actually mostly help support our small businesses and figure out how it is that we can get people who are good neighborhood businesses to either expand and continue in our neighborhood, or good businesses, family-serving ones, to come into our neighborhoods. I will tell you that I've had a lot of trouble working with property owners. So they do not like seeing letters from me in government, I guess. So I've had really no luck in talking to them, but I would just say that our efforts that we identified in the blueprint was simply pointing out where those opportunity areas would be, but not guaranteeing that something would happen. And I think that the affordable housing bonus program was one way that we thought could actually incentivize it, at least along our transit corridors.
Okay, don't go away, Supervisor, because there's another one for the blueprint, if you want to handle this one. In your publication, the Sunset District Blueprint, you identify in the land use chapter of Objective 3, ensure that any growth in the district does not adversely impact the residential neighborhood character of the Sunset. How do you see the character not being adversely impacted by affordable housing projects?
Thank you. So in our blueprint, as you can see, my main focus is actually along our transit and commercial corridors. And I do feel that, in those areas, there are opportunities where there are a lot of buildings that actually have not been built up to their existing height limits. And I felt that, yes, we could do more infill there and potentially go up to the existing height limit, and that extra density and those extra units could very well serve the community that needs the housing, and it would be along transit corridors, really hoping that the residents who live there will take public transportation and not, choose to drive. And I know there's a lot of concerns about parking and congestion in our neighborhood. So my main focus was really on the transit corridors. Now, I will tell you that despite the affordable housing bonus program, despite whatever other incentives that there may be or surface, even when I'm long gone, that the planning department process, the approval process, is still really important. We can't forget about that. As I think Medica mentioned, we don't change the fact that projects still need to go through neighborhood notifications, that there will still be planning commission hearing, that there's still opportunities for neighbors to speak out, whether in support or against projects at these commission hearings, that you can still file appeals if you don't like a project. So we're not changing any of that. And all of that, those are in place because we know that neighbors care a lot about neighborhood character. And those are in place to ensure that your voices are heard, and if there may be a great project but you don't like what it's doing to the neighborhood, then we have seen those projects be stopped. So I want to emphasize that the existing planning permit review process, those are still in place.
Great, thanks. Kind of related question here. When are these new heights going to start bleeding from the commercial corridors into the residential streets? Anybody want to tackle that? Okay.
So as you saw from all of the maps, actually, yeah. I mean, if you saw the maps, and what's stated in the legislation, RH1 and RH2, meaning single-family homes and I guess two-unit dwelling units, those are exempted from the program. So that's not changing. We're not planning on adding any of that into legislation. In fact, I think that the state law doesn't allow us to do that. So that it's not going to be bleeding into those strictly residential neighborhoods. What you see on this heat map essentially is what will be eligible.
Thanks. Why can't this be done within existing zoning? Or with existing zoning? Kirsten, you want to give the...
Sure.
So why can't we fit more housing within the existing zoning, I think is the question. And so I encourage whoever asked that question to take a look at David Baker Architects study. They've got I showed you their renderings, which are beautiful, but if you can handle a little wonkiness, they have all these blue boxes and yellow squares that show you what you can accomplish and what you can accomplish in our existing zoning. About half of the 12 sites we looked at, they hit their head on the height limits really soon. So you can't fit that many more units unless you want to get those really small units. The other half of them, their heights might be here, but their density limits only let them build up to here. So they really need relief from that density in order to fit more units. But what if you aren't asking why can't we fit this many units, but why can't we get more affordable units with the existing controls? The way this works, the magic we're pulling here is the land is worth X, developer pay, and that's based on how many units can be built. Developer still pays X, can build more units, and can use that extra value that they've gotten to subsidize those affordable units. If we just use our existing zoning, there's no magical internal subsidy to help the developer create more affordability. So you can do it over time. If you, let's say we just made the inclusionary requirement 30% right now, didn't change anything else, we would have a long wait time before the land prices adapted to that, in my understanding.
Next question, why does the Affordable Housing Bonus Program map identify 30,500 buildings / parcels in and around neighborhood business districts and on either side of rapid transit corridors if only 240 so-called soft sites are the targeted sites for the density bonus?
So this is a common question. I think I've never been able to fully articulate my thoughts, but whenever we do a rezoning, we change things by district, not by parcel. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, our knowledge about each parcel is pretty good, but not 100%. Like I said, there might be a soft site that's actually like, I'm trying to think of something really valuable and important that we all know wouldn't go away. So our map is only so good. And then the second reason is the state law applies in all of these districts. What we're trying to do is acknowledge to the state, we understand this law applies. This is available in all these districts as required, and then we chisel down sort of where it will actually happen based on the financial feasibility. So it's a pretty standard way. When we rezoned eastern neighborhoods in Market Octavia, we just rezoned everything. I think we have, I'm not going to know the number of projects that we have, but in Market Octavia we had 6,000 new units, in eastern neighborhoods we had 10,000, so let's say, you know, a couple hundred projects total in those areas, but we rezoned thousands of parcels as a way of kind of keeping our code slightly less insane, if that's possible.
Okay. Another question from the same person. Under the Affordable Housing Bonus Program, the 30% program for affordability, the developer still gets to build 70% market rate. So the Affordable Housing Bonus Program will continue the rapid expansion of market rate construction and exacerbating the housing imbalance into the future. So how will this program stop the low and income San Francisco residents from being forced out? Interesting.
I feel like in San Francisco this is almost like a religious question, but there are some people who feel that if you build more market rate housing, it will reduce the tendency for high income people to apply pressure on our existing 300,000 housing units. Some people believe that. I'm one of those people that believe if we build more housing, then that will relieve the pressure. There's another set of people that think, you know, you build more luxury housing or market rate housing, and that will create a demand for more people who are high income. The neighborhood character will change, and the services will change, and somehow that means the low income people have more pressure to leave. That's also a perspective that is very popular in San Francisco. I would offer that the 30% bar is higher than any city has ever done. And by the way, is what our voters have just asked us to do. They said, we understand we need market rate development, but we also need affordability. We passed Proposition K with 60-some% voter support saying, you know what, we want to see 33% affordability. So this program, tied with a bunch of our others, helps us get there. I hope I answered that.
Two questions here. Where are the provisions for folks with very low income? And then let me read the second question. Construction is heavy in historically black neighborhoods, Bayview and Western Addition. Will this force greater evictions for black communities and threaten black lives?
I'm happy to take that.
You want to take that one?
You want to do that? All right.
So, if I can understand it, the first part is a question about where is the program for low-income individuals. And I think from the beginning and from the onset of this program, we've been very straightforward about who this program is designed to serve. And for us, this program was designed to try and meet the needs of our moderate and middle-income households, for reasons I'm happy to talk about in a moment. As for our low-income individuals, which was really the question that people asked, over the next 5 years, we intend to spend $1.7 billion in construction in preservation for very low-income households. And the reason we do that is because our local tax dollars go further when we build low-income housing. We are able to match our money almost 2 and sometimes 4 times as much with outside resources, typically other government financing, in order to build those projects. So the cost to us is less than what the impact is overall, so we tend to build more very low-income housing than we tend to build housing for the middle class. And the reason that is because there are no matching subsidies to help our local dollars go further. And so what's unique about this program is that this program builds moderate and middle-income units without any government subsidy. And because if we had a subsidy, we'd likely be able to lose that fight because there's a lot of people fighting for those scarce resources. And the question about African Americans and Black Lives Matter, I would say the housing bond that recently passed invested money that will be set aside for the rebuilding of the Potrero and Sunnydale projects. These are very large family developments that are dilapidated, that ultimately were almost close to, if not past their useful lives as properties. And we made a commitment to those communities not to just tear them down, have everybody move off-site wherever they go, and then build back new shiny buildings. We're going to do it in a phased way, so we made a commitment of zero displacement for those buildings and for the residents who live there, so that the residents who live there now will experience a better community when the project is finished. And that means it's slower, it means it's more expensive. In San Francisco, that's the right way to approach an issue like that.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions here about the blueprint. The first is the blueprint states to establish neighborhood defining connections to natural landmarks such as Ocean Beach and Golden Gate Park, building up and creating 15 residential units at 1225 La Playa at Lincoln would deteriorate views from many directions of the windmill, of the beach, of the park, etc. Do you not agree?
Well, I have no intention of building or wanting to encourage building of 15-story buildings by the beach. But I would say that in that land use section, thank you whoever was reading in great detail our blueprint that we wrote and spent a lot of time working on. But what I meant by creating more connections to the beach from our neighborhood is really things like the Terravelle Streetscape Improvement Project. Things like that, where we really try to foster that sense of you're in the Sunset District, and how do we easily and safely get to the beach, and embrace that fact instead of saying here's a beach and here's our neighborhood. So again, I have no intention of doing something like that, and that's why I posed the question to all of you today about whether we want to exempt out the properties from this local program or have it fall under a state program.
I think to be fair, the question stated 15 residential units.
Oh, 15 residential
not
units,
stories.
okay, sorry. But I don't want 15 stories either.
And a parallel question regarding the same site. Are the soft sites truly consistent with the Sunset Blueprint? 1225 La Playa at Lincoln is identified as a soft site, yet this is a cornerstone to our neighborhood. And to increase height and density is inconsistent with several of the main points listed in the Sunset Blueprint framework. How could anchoring the northwest corner of District 4 with abnormally high buildings ensure that, quote, any growth in the district does not adversely impact the existing residential neighborhood character?
Thank you. You've made your point clear, and I think a lot of people have made their point clear on whether it's nextdoor.com or so forth. I read all your comments, and that's exactly why I came back to you all tonight to ask you about whether we want to exempt out these oceanfront properties from our local version. So again, all of that is to address those concerns about whether these beachfront properties should be part of that, should be allowed to have the additional 2 stories, or maybe under state program more than that. So I hear you loud and clear. That's why we came back out here to ask you this very specific question.
Can I ask one question? I'm a little confused about the state program. It's been in place since 1979, but no one has built in 35 years anything on the beach. So why is all of a sudden now there's pick this or that? I'm not understanding. If we didn't do this, your proposal, and we left it to the state, it hasn't happened in 35 years. Is there some new incentive for that to happen now?
Yes, so I cited at the very beginning a 2013 court case that came out of the California Court of Appeals, and it was a case that came out of the city of Napa. So in that case, it essentially, in the holding, there was a situation that was very similar to what San Francisco was doing, which was that we were essentially telling developers that you cannot opt into the state density bonus law and get your concessions and waivers from the planning code unless you unless you go above and beyond what our own city's inclusionary housing requirements are, which is that if you build 10 or more units, you have to provide 12% affordable housing units on site, or 20% off-site, or 20% fee. So it was really that case. And since 2013, it's taken the planning department about 2 years working with those consultants to develop this. So were it not for that case, we probably wouldn't be here today.
That wasn't in the coastal zone.
I'm sorry?
That Napa case didn't address a property in the coastal zone.
No,
It belongs
but-
to 54 million in California.
Right, so that case absolutely did not address the coastal zone. However, again, like I said, I heard you loud and clear about your concerns, and as someone who has worked very hard on the Ocean Beach Master Plan, and I understand that we're addressing issues regarding sea level rise, erosion on our beach, all of those present justifications for potentially exempting them out from this program. So again, that's why I threw the question out at you.
Great. I'm not sure you need to answer this because I think you have, Supervisor, but just to be fair to the audience here, another question very similar. Wouldn't the increasing densities along the Great Highway at La Playa be a big impact on the Ocean Beach Master Plan?
Yes.
There are 2 questions here regarding the state density bonus. One, have there been any San Francisco lawsuits based on the 2013 Napa ruling? If not, why the big hurry without further study?
I've gotten this question a lot as well. So we have not had any lawsuits. I think you guys should all be clear that we do have a development community that follow the work of our department very closely. They know that our team is working on it. They've actually provided feedback on the work of our consultants and of the legislation itself. We're gathering the specific sites, but we have a number of people who have gone through the first step of this process with projects that are consistent with the state law, our local programs, various iterations. People are waiting to have a local program, and if we don't develop a local program, if we, for some reason, get to the board or the commission and decision makers say, you know what, we don't want this local program, we just want the state law to regulate everything, then those projects will move forward under that. So people are ready. They all are people who have been doing business in the city for a long time, and one of the ethics that they have is to kind of let the city develop the policy first. But I do think that they are hoping that we are moving forward with this. Otherwise, we'll move forward with that. There have not been a lawsuit, though.
There's one thing on that. At the District 7 meeting, at the Hall of Flowers,
Yes.
one thing that hit me that you said, and I thought it was interesting, you said one thing you like, you know, from a planner's point of view, that you like about the program. Tell me if I got this wrong.
Okay.
One thing you like about it is it gives you kind of like a package that you could deal with, rather than having to negotiate each site, okay? And the implication was, you really don't have enough staff and trained staff to deal with all the projects on a case-by-case basis. This gives you a way to package a program and thereby make it so that you don't have to get into all those negotiations. I may have misunderstood.
Let me restate your comment and then...
Well, let me just finish the thought.
Okay.
If I have it basically correct, okay, then what I'm hearing you say is, if you had more staff, trained staff, to do this huge project that we voted on with K and A, you might be able to deal with these developers on a case-by-case basis under the state density law and keep things under control.
I'll let the director know that you were interested in staffing us up, but I think
Well, no, I
the meaning of
understand.
my comment was a little lost, so let me clarify.
Okay,
I don't think the issue is staff. No, in some ways it would be way more time consuming for the department to negotiate
Yeah.
every project, and we would need some solution of some sort. But I think for me, the thing that's more important as a planner is the consistency of the expectations of the developer, the community, and the planner. If you're trying to negotiate every deal, you lose all of that. So we have a planning code that is 3 binders tall because we care a lot about not just what shape the building is, what use there is, but we care about every detail. And when you go from that sort of prescriptive, well-understood, well-studied perspective to a negotiated process, everything's up for negotiation and there are no standards. So to me, that's not attractive. Staffing, no staffing, whatever the case may be, it's the certainty for all parties at the table and the boundaries in terms of how far the negotiation can get pushed one way or the other. Gil seemed like you wanted to chime in on that as well.
No, that's fine. I'm just getting a little anxious that we've got a bunch of more questions to get through. But
Sorry.
Good question.